Good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to wherever you are in the world. If you're in the UK and in Europe, it's the evening. If you're watching from the States, it's the afternoon. Over in Asia and Australia, it's early hours of the morning. Good evening and welcome. I'm glad you could tune in today. It's going to be a fantastic seminar. What we're going to focus on today is using CBT as a therapeutic intervention. Now, we've got only a short time to cover CBT, the best part of an hour or so, to cover a massive area. So I'll make every effort to go into areas that you can apply in your own life if you wish to, and obviously if you're working in the area of CBT, I'm sure you'll learn and do some reinforced learning as well. So we're in for a bit of an interactive seminar this evening, so I want you to participate in the exercises, and if you've got any questions, feel free to email us as and when you wish. Just let me briefly introduce myself. I'm Petruzzi. I'm one of the trainers at the Centre of Excellence Online and the Centre of Excellence, and I'm pleased to be bringing you this seminar this evening. So CBT, let's look into CBT as a therapeutic intervention. One of the things about CBT, it's a talking therapy, and it helps you manage the problems that you might have by the way you think, our thought process. So rather than the conventional psychotherapy approach going into the past, CBT is a talking therapy. It deals with pretty much the here and now. And one of the areas and one of the most powerful ways of using CBT is in the area of anxiety, in stress, post-traumatic stress, behavioural change. So like I said before, unlike psychotherapy, it doesn't go into the past, it deals with pretty much the here and now. So it can be a very powerful and useful tool to use. One of the things I always say is change your perspective, you change your world. What we focus on is what we generally tend to get. Now, one of the analogies I use is some people, do you ever come across those people who, whatever's going on in their life, regardless of what's going on in their life, they might have a lot of great news, a lot of good things going on, yet they always seem to be downbeat and negative. Anyone ever come across that sort of person before who's always kind of negative and downbeat? I'm sure we've always come across that sort of person. On the flip side of that, the other type of person who is always pretty positive and focused and energetic. Now, as a general rule, do you think the person who has the upbeat attitude less problem than someone who's got a negative attitude? Probably not. Probably not, because all of us in life have got things that are going on in our life. I'm a big believer that, as long as you're 6 foot above ground, you're always going to have certain problems going on in your life. So I think the key thing is how you focus on that can be quite useful to you. Now, some people tend to focus on the negative, some tend to focus on the positive. Whatever you put your attention on consciously is going to have an impact on how you feel and how you behave. Now, one thing to think about where CBT is concerned is the mind-body link. Okay, so we've got a mind and body link. We've got mind and body. Anyone who disputes the mind-body link, just think, take your mind back to when you're at school and you had an exam. Think of how you felt. You might have needed to go to the toilet when you had an exam, the mind-body link. Or alternatively, think about what happens when you're embarrassed, to your cheeks. Or think about what happens to your heart rate when you get scared. So there's a mind-body link, a mind-body connection. Now, one of the things about CBT is our thoughts and emotions and behaviour are connected. Now think about it. The way we think, or what goes through our mind, impacts on our feelings. Okay, so what happens in our mind and what we're thinking about impacts our feelings, our emotions, and our emotions impact our behaviour. Let me give you a scenario. Let's take a scenario. Okay, now I need to take this scenario. What would happen, let's say for example, you were going for a job interview. And you went for this job interview, you really wanted the job, you felt the interview went really, really well, and the person, the manager, or the person who interviewed you says, we're going to call you on Wednesday to let you know if you got the job or not. Wednesday comes along and you're waiting and waiting and waiting for that call and it doesn't arrive. The call doesn't come along. Now, it gets to 5 o'clock, you think, well, the organisation's going to close at 5, you haven't heard anything, you've checked your emails, you've asked your friends, your family, anyone who's been in the house, has any call come in, you've checked your phone 100 times. Now think about it, and think about what's going through your mind. You really want the job, you really, really want this job, big time, And emotionally, your thoughts are having an impact on your emotions. Okay, think of how you're going to start to feel. If at 5, half 5, 6 o'clock, dinner time, no calls come through, into the evening, nothing's come through. Think about your thoughts just before you go to bed and how you feel emotionally if you really want that job. Now, your thoughts could run wild. You might think, well, maybe I haven't got the job, maybe they don't want me, maybe I'm not the right candidate. You're thinking of all these permutations, yet we don't know what's happened. You know, the person in the interviewing might be off ill on that day, it might be they decided to take somebody else on, but we don't know. But we can sort of stew over it, and by stewing over it, it's having an impact on our emotions. Now, as this impacts our emotions, it's going to impact our behaviour, what we do behaviourally. Okay, so you might decide, I'll wait till the morning, I'll enjoy the rest of my evening, watch a film, connect with my family, just enjoy myself for the rest of the evening. You might say, okay, I'm going to enjoy myself, or alternatively, you might stew over it and not get any sleep or any rest for that matter. You might be really stressed, I can't believe I'm at that job, I really want this job. So all these things could take into effect really. So one will impact the other. Our thoughts will impact our emotions, and the emotions will impact our behaviour. Now this happens pretty much with a lot of things that we do. Now think about it, you might be walking down the street, you walk past your best friend, they don't acknowledge you, or what you think was your best friend, and he or she doesn't acknowledge you. What goes through your mind emotionally? How do you think? How do you feel? What goes on? And what do you do behaviourally? Do you send your friend or your so-called friend a text saying, why didn't you acknowledge me? Or do you carry on walking? Or do you think, well actually, he or she may not have seen me? So it doesn't take a long time for us to form beliefs and opinions, and all these things are interconnected. The beauty of CBT is it helps us to make sense of our problems. We can start to make sense of our problems. We can break them down. We can break down the thoughts, we can change the perspective, we can break that negative spiral. Have you ever got yourself in that negative spiral? I'm sure we've all been there, that negative spiral where one thought leads to another and it has a massive snowball. So for example, you know, your boss might say to you, I'd like you to come in for a meeting on Monday morning, and he sends you the text, or she sends the text on Friday afternoon, and all throughout the weekend, you know, your plans are on hold, you're stewing, what could this meeting be about? What could my boss be thinking? What could happen? It kind of spirals over. And then, you know, you've got this weekend free, and over the weekend you're thinking, I can't enjoy my weekend, and you behave disruptively with your friends, your family, your children, you go for a meal, you feel very negative in the meal, all these things really, and it sort of ruins your weekend. Then you get up on Monday morning, you make your way to work, you meet the boss, and what they've got to tell you, well, what they tell you is, you know, we've got a promotion for you, we're pleased with what you're doing work-wise, or they might bring you a new system in work that you have to learn or need to learn, or they might have news, negative news for you, who knows really. But that negative spiral, we need to break it down. So in that situation, a situation where you're called in to meet your boss on a Monday, you know, you could think all sorts of things. Well, even if it was the worst case scenario, you're going to be made redundant or lose your job, you might think, well, actually, you know what, without, you know, sounding patronising, it might be a good opportunity for me to move forward into a different industry. Who knows? Alternatively, you might say, you know what, I'll put it to one side, I can't do nothing about it on the weekend, I'm going to enjoy myself, liberate myself, and come Monday, we'll deal with it then. Okay, so that gives you a bit of an idea how we can use this process. Okay, now what I want you to do now is an exercise. Pretty powerful exercise. Now think about our thoughts, and all these thoughts that hit our mind in a given period of time. We've got all these thoughts that go through our mind, race through our mind. Think about the world we live in today. All these thoughts from the moment you get up in the morning, all throughout the day, through the evening, you go to bed at night, all these thoughts are circulating through your mind. What I want you to do is just take a moment to observe your thought pattern. Just take a moment to observe what goes on in your mind. Okay, so if you're listening out there, you're watching out there, wherever you are in the world, what I want you to do is just close your eyes and really relax, and just let yourself go. Just close your eyes, really relax, take a deep breath in, deep breath out, bringing in through your nose, out through your mouth, closing your eyes, really relax. Just really, really relax, okay? and just notice what goes through your mind. Just observe your thoughts. How often do we do this through the course of the day? How often do we actually take time to observe what's going through our mind? Probably not often, but I'm going to ask you now for 5 minutes, just observe what goes through your mind or what's going through your mind. Take time, because most thoughts that go through our mind aren't, or they are harmless I should say, but there are some self-destructive thoughts that we don't take control of, or we don't assess, or we don't evaluate. They could spiral us into all sorts of different thoughts and feelings. That's why sometimes people obviously have, I'm not just putting it down to this, but potentially certain thoughts can lead to anxiety, to stress, to post-traumatic stress, to irrational behaviours. Now just take the time to do the exercise, close your eyes, and just notice for a few minutes what goes through your mind. Just take the time to notice what goes through your mind. Breathing in and breathing out, and just take a few moments to notice what's going through your mind, the thoughts, and any images that go through, any sounds, any feelings, where the feelings are they loud, are they far away? Just take the time to observe your thoughts. Okay? Taking the time. Okay, if you've managed to do the exercise, great. If you haven't, then you can do the exercise at a time convenient to you. The process is to take a time out, close your eyes, really relax, take a deep breath in, a deep breath out, and just take the time to observe your thoughts. And just take note of your thoughts and what's going through your mind and how that's impacting your behaviour, how you think and how you feel. Okay. Now, one of the most powerful ways to change any negative behaviour or any unwanted behaviour or any limiting belief or anything that's not serving us anymore is make sense of what's going on or put things into perspective. I mentioned earlier, you could be walking down the street and you walk past what you think at least was your best friend, they don't acknowledge you, and you start thinking potentially all sorts of different things. You start feeling possibly negative, wondering why they didn't acknowledge you. You start also behaving potentially irrationally. You might send the person a text saying, what's the problem? So all these things could, take into consideration, which is key. Now what I want you to do, with that in mind, okay, think of the things that go on through our life. General things that go on through our life. Putting a sense of perspective in our life. Now, I come across a lot of people that I work with from a therapeutic perspective and also just in passing. And some of the language patterns they use have negative permutations. For example, one of the most powerful things that people say is, I have to. I have to, I have to, I have to. I have to do this, I have to do that. Putting more pressure on the person. Think about that statement, I have to, and what that entails. I have to go to work, I have to do this lousy job, I have to meet up with this person, I have to do this, I have to exercise. Well, you don't. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. And you might be saying now, well actually it's easy for you to say standing there, but if I don't go to work, I can't pay the bills. I understand that. What I'm saying is how we phrase. What we say has a powerful impact in how we think, how we feel, and how we behave. So change the word to I have to, I choose to. I choose to exercise. There's choice. I choose to go to the gym. I choose to go to work. I choose to walk around the block. I choose to eat healthily. So we can exercise that option. Shifting our perspective. So we can look at a challenging situation that might be going on in our life. Now, many of us, or all of us who are above ground are going to face challenges in our life at some point or the other. That's a given. If you look for an easy life, what do you get? Exactly, life becomes a lot more harder than what it is. So don't look for things that get easier. Rise to the challenge that comes your way is what I always say. And I think that's quite important, that we build resilience and strength and rise to whatever goes on and meet the challenge in the best possible way we can. Now, what I want you to do is another exercise now, is to take a challenging situation in your life. I want you to take a challenging situation in your life, nothing major. It can be if you want it to be, it's entirely up to you. It could be, for example, you might be being made redundant. Or it could be, you're breaking up with a partner. I said nothing major, by the way. Or it just could be, generally speaking, you're thinking about changing jobs, or anything really, anything you want it to be. But take a challenging situation in your life. Okay, now think of the way you've been seeing that challenge. Let me give you an example. A colleague of mine was being made redundant. Now, the way she saw the situation was very negative. She was saying, I'm never going to find a job like that again. The job was great, it paid well, it was easy to get to work, I really want to keep the job. All these things were going through her mind. Okay, it was a challenge, a massive life change. Change in life can be very challenging. Now, what I suggested she did was, when she was ready, to start thinking about a way to move forward. Because if you're stuck in a certain situation, you're not doing yourself or anybody else any good. So if you've got your own clients, or alternatively you're studying through the course, or you just want to learn just for your own self-interest how to tackle challenges or overcome challenges, or at least make sense of certain challenges or do something about them, the one thing I say is look at a number of different ways you could look at the situation. So in the case of the woman or my friend who was being made redundant, I said, what are 5 ways you could look at that situation differently? And she stopped and thought. She said to me at first, are you mad? I don't know what I'm going to do without this job. I don't know how I'm going to sort of get by. And I said, well, think of 5 different ways you can look at it. And she took her time and went away over the course of a week and came back a week later and said, you know what? I see this as a great opportunity now to move on and move forward. I wasn't really happy in that job, and it was time I moved forward. This gave me the push that I needed. So she started seeing it differently. You could call it rewiring the brain, because if the brain is stuck in a certain thought process, it's not good for anybody really. So ultimately in the end, what she did there was think of a positive of the situation, or at least look at it differently. Sort of like the old scenario where you lose a job, and at the time you're devastated and really upset at losing the job. Yet, 2 or 3 years later, you look back and think, actually the best thing that could have happened to me. I've got a new business, I've got a new job, or whatever. That could be, your partner walks out on you, and 10 years later, you're happily married to somebody else. It's hard to make sense of it at the time. But, these things happen. In life, things happen. And if you do the exercise, take a challenge in your life, a challenging situation in your life, and write down 5 different ways you could see that situation. 5 different ways you could see that challenging situation. If you can't think of 5, at least think of 1 or 2, or whatever works for you. You're not accountable to do anything you don't want to do, yet in saying that, at least start shifting your perspective. Because one of the things in life, one of the things that I learned through doing therapy and therapeutic interventions, people tend to get stuck in what I call their old story, their old way of seeing things. And that can be a dangerous place to be. And when I say that and talk about the old story, it might be that they broke up 10 years ago in a relationship and they still harbour resentment on the other person or the opposite sex or all these things really. Or it might be that, they lost their job a number of years ago, or it could be that they got injured, or anything could have happened really. Now, I'm not saying sometimes life doesn't seem unfair. Life can be. You could be happily going along in your life, everything's really, really well. And I know from being a therapist that sometimes life throws you a curveball. It throws you a curveball and it's not great. We've all been in situations, certainly been in situations myself, where things are going relatively really, really well, then bang, something happens and things aren't the way you want them to be. Now you can react in 2 ways. You can become a victim, or you can take responsibility for the situation and move forward into a different direction. Moving forward is at least doing something. If moving forward isn't what you want, you take a new direction in your life, then be flexible in your approach. But one thing I always say is be a master of your own destiny. You wouldn't put a bad film on every night on the TV. You wouldn't put you wouldn't put negative pictures around your house or screensavers. You wouldn't play a bad song every day on the radio, on your CD, on your iPod. Why would we want to run that film in our head? Edit our own film. Okay, if the past isn't what you want it to be, then take the positives and move forward the direction that you want to go. And you might be saying, well, actually, it's easy for you to say, Jim, I'm in a very challenging situation at the moment. I can't make sense of the situation. This has happened, that's happened, my partner's walked out, or I've lost my job, or I'm not feeling great. You know, I fully appreciate that certain things happen in life. You know, we don't deal our own cards, but we can respond the way we want to. It's entirely up to us. You know, we can become that victim and stay there for all our life, or we can decide to move forward. Life is a marathon, it's not a sprint. In life, there's a number of people who've had a lot of good things go on in their life in the past even, but they delete all those, and they focus purely on the negatives. And that can't always be a good place to be. But by being aware of our thoughts, we can start creating a brighter future, even if it's incremental improvements. Some improvement is better than no improvement. A lot of people out there underestimate small improvements. They look for that big change, all these motivational seminars and books and all this stuff out there on the market, change your life. And yeah, I'm sure we can all change our lives, but for some people it might not just be getting up in the morning and a massive radical change. It might be to get up in the morning and make a healthy breakfast and walk around the block, or you know, have a drink of juice in the morning that's healthy for you, or you go see a friend that you haven't seen for a long time. It could be small changes, okay? But be mindful of the stories you tell yourselves in certain situations, and certainly come away from being that victim, because as long as you're the victim, it's very, very challenging to make a brighter future. And I work with people sometimes who've had breakups in relationships, and they still are this victim many years later. Oh, I know sometimes it's tough out there. I know sometimes we give everything we've got and think we should be, you know, literally entitled to a better situation, but, you know, that's life. We need to move forward. Otherwise, we become stuck in certain situations. One thing to consider as well, and a great technique I'm going to show you shortly, is our self-talk. Now, I mentioned earlier, all these thoughts go through your mind over a course of a day. Many, many thoughts go through your mind over a course of a day. Now, most of them are very harmless, okay? Self-talk is very, very harmless in general. So it might be, your self-talk is, I need to go to the store to buy some milk, I need to buy some stuff for breakfast tomorrow, I've got to go shopping, what time's the football on? So generally speaking, it can be pretty harmless. Sometimes it can be negative. Think about it. Think of some of the things that you say to yourself, and take note of what you're saying to yourself. I always say to people, if we spoke the way we speak to ourselves, like if we spoke to anybody else, the way we spoke to ourselves, we'd have no friends left. Because it's pretty powerful stuff. Think about it. Some of the phrases we use, I'm useless, worthless, hopeless, helpless, some pretty damning phrases that have a massive impact on our life. I always say to people, change what goes in there. Self-talk is a great place to change. Now think about this for one moment. For example, let's say you know, you spill a little bit of tea and you call yourself useless. What impact does that have on your mind? Would you call your best friend that? If you went to your friend's house, maybe you would, and they spilled a bit of tea, would you say, you're useless, you're hopeless? You probably wouldn't. You know, and by doing that over and over again, it's not doing our self-esteem and confidence any good. And I think it's really important that we take control of what goes through our mind, at least by changing our inner self-talk. Now, when I work with athletes, self-talk is really powerful. I get them to, you know, really focus on their self-talk. So they might, you know, come up against a certain opposition, and they might talk themselves out of performing really well. The gremlins creep in their mind, I'm hopeless, useless, worthless, I don't deserve to win. And look at ways they can change that. Even when I'm doing with coach training for coaches, in sports, in football, I used to do training the coaches who used to work with young footballers, And they used to stand at the touch lines and shout at the young footballer, "Don't lose the ball." Now think about it, the mind can't process negative instruction. Don't lose the ball, what goes through your mind? Exactly what you said not to do. What's the more favourable instruction? Keep possession. So in your own mind, take a few moments to do the exercise, self-talk. Think of some negative statements you say to yourself and how you could change it. For example, you might say, "I'm not worthy of that job," or "I'm not good enough to do that presentation," or "I'm not worth getting that job." And think about how you could rephrase that. Think about how you could change that. So it might be, "I'm not good enough to do that presentation," and you could change that. Maybe there might be a confidence issue, I don't know. But you could start from the beginning. Well, what can I present? I can do. Because I always say to people, don't be in awe of anybody else. I'm not in awe of anybody else. I admire people, I admire what they do. Yet, in saying that, I certainly not in awe of anybody. And the reason being is that we're all good at doing certain things. There's certain things I can do that you can't do, and vice versa. And there's some things that you can do nobody else can do. So, one of the best ways to start building confidence is take note of the good things that you can do, whatever it is. We're unique. We're one in however many billion in the world, and billions that have gone, past and present. So, we are unique. Now do the self-talk exercise. Take a statement that you might say is negative, like "I'm useless," and change it to a positive affirmation. "I am fantastic. I am good at doing something." And even more powerful sometimes, asking yourself certain questions, like, how can I be better? How can I improve? What am I good at? I always do a gratitude list in the morning. I get up in the morning and I write a gratitude list. I ask myself, what am I most grateful for in my life? If you haven't done one before, I suggest write one yourself. What am I most grateful in my life? And it changes my whole perspective of any situation. You need to realise a lot of things that we sort of sweat over are just small stuff in the grand scheme of things. Life is short. We're only here for a very, very short time when you think about the grand scheme of things. Some of the things that we fuss and think about, really when you think about it, is it worth it? So take time, a few moments. If you don't do it now, take time to do it some other time. The self-talk exercise, change a negative statement to a positive statement. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so what I want to do now is one last technique we're going to cover. Really, really powerful technique. It's a problem-solving exercise. Okay. I tend to focus on solutions. From a coaching point of view, one of my philosophies as a coaching point of view is acknowledge the problem and focus on the solution. I spend 10% focusing on the problem and 90% on the solution in my own personal experience as a coach. And the reason being is that, yes, there are certain problems in the world that we live in. There's no point being in denial. There's no point saying, well, life is a bed of roses, because it's not. We know that. We know that in life we've got certain challenges, and there's no point being in denial, but see the situation for what it is. Nothing worse, nothing less. And focus on the solution. Okay, so, you might have lost your job, and you might be very negative about losing your job. Your business might be struggling. You might be in a relationship problem. If you're going to stay there, it's not a good place to be. Focusing on the solution moves you forward to where you want to be. My emphasis is in focusing on the solution 90% of the time. So one of the things I do, one exercise I do, I'm going to take you through an exercise shortly, is I'll identify what the problem is. I won't gloss over the cracks. There's no point saying there's no weeds in the garden. If there is weeds, there's weeds that need to be cut out and dug out. So we acknowledge that, then we focus on how we can solve it. So if we've got weeds in the garden, we might call a gardener, we might do it ourselves, there's different things we can do to solve the issue. And that might relate to any problem that you've got in your life at the moment. Most people in society tend to spend the other way around. They spend 90% of the problem, 10% of the solution. And that can't be a good place to be. As I said earlier, change your perspective, change your world. Change your story. Really powerful technique to do. But what I want to do now as an exercise, if you would kindly join me, is we're going to do a problem-solving technique. So the first thing we're going to do with this exercise is identify a problem you might have in your life at the moment. So we identify a problem that you might have, whatever it might be. You can identify that problem As I mentioned earlier, it might be that business is struggling, it might be that you're losing your job, you might be redundant, relationship problem, it might just be that you're nervous about doing the presentation. It could be anything really, but let's start from the beginning, identify what the problem is, okay? After you've done that and you've identified what the problem is, what I want you to do is think of 5 solutions to the problem. Okay, now you don't have to think of every solution now, you don't have to do 10 solutions. To at least think of 5 solutions to the problem. So if you're losing your job, it might be, well, I'm going to do a new CV, I'm going to start applying for a new job, I'm going to build a business. So we're looking at all these different solutions. If you've broken up a relationship and you're really down, upset, it might be that you decide, okay, to feel better, I'm going to go traveling, I'm going to start socializing, okay, so whatever works for you. It might be if you're nervous for a presentation that's coming up shortly, you might think, well, actually I need to prepare, I'm going to go to a course, I'm going to learn from somebody who's presenting. So we're thinking about tangible solutions to any problem. Now, write down 5 solutions, okay? Just take your time, identify the problem and write down 5 solutions. Okay? If you can't think of 5 solutions, think of as many as you can. After you've thought of 5 or more solutions, or as many as you can for the time being, identify the pros and cons of that solution. Okay, the pros and cons, so we can weigh it all up. Okay, let's say for example, you're being made redundant, and one of the solutions is to start a business. You decide the pros of starting the business are, I could make more money from starting the business, I would have more time to spend with my friends and family, I'd be doing something I really enjoy. So you could rattle off a list of pros. The cons might be, it might take a little bit of time to get that going. It might mean initially spending less time with family. So each thing has its negatives and positives. So the other solution might be to apply for a new job. Now, what are the pros of applying for a new job? Well, the job you're applying for might be what you're doing now, and it's being phased out of the market, the world we live in. The pro might be that you really enjoy what you're doing. And if you just do the job somewhere else, you've experienced, you'll enjoy doing it there. So all things have their positives and negatives. For every solution, write down the pros and write down the cons. Okay? Then, I always say, if you sit on the fence, you get splinters, you've got to move forward. Circle a solution. So it might be the solution we decide to run with is starting a business. So you circle that. Okay? And having circled that solution, then what we do is build a timeline to enact a solution. Because the solution is only a solution if we're doing something about it. If you're not doing anything about it, then nothing's going to happen. So let's say we've circled the solution, we're going to start a business, then you decide what you're going to do about it. So you might decide to go see a business manager, you might go on a course, you might speak to someone who's doing the business you want to do, and just put it in a timeline and go away and enact a solution. Once you've enacted the solution, then you can sort of look back and think, well, actually, did it work? Do I do something different? Because I always believe if at first you don't succeed, pick yourself up and go again. It's not the end of the world. We keep going. So once again, to go through the exercise, identify the problem is the first thing you do. After you've identified the problem, think of 5 possible solutions to that problem, whatever they might be. Write down the pros and cons of every solution. Make it an exhaustive list. Then circle the solution that you feel drawn to, that you think is the right solution for you. And then enact the solution by putting a timeline together. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Then after you've done that, then you can reflect by looking back to see if it's worked. Because I'm a big believer, like I mentioned earlier, that it's not over till it's over. Every person that has ever succeeded in anything that they do has had challenges. And if they didn't keep going, we wouldn't have what we have in the world today. All the things that we take for granted in our life today, our phones, our cars, our planes, our computers, everyone who ever invented any of those things would have come across problems. If they didn't do a similar process in their mind like we're doing now, finding a solution, then we'd be 1,000 years behind where we are today. It's been these innovators who have looked for solutions, not only in your own life. You wouldn't be where you are today if you didn't do this process without even realising it. This is formalising it and being aware of it, and then you can become more consistent at it. Or if you're a therapist, you can use this or deploy a process like this in your own practice. Or alternatively, you might be a student who's studying and think, you know what, this is great to learn. It's entirely up to you what you use and how you use the process. But let me just go through it one more time. Remember, identify the problem, think of 5 solutions to the problem, write down the pros and cons, then choose a solution and enact that solution. Okay, and then after you've done the solution, you can sort of reflect back and see if it worked and what your thoughts are on that solution. And then pretty much go from there. Okay, so that pretty much brings us to the close of today's tutorial and seminar. I've really enjoyed delivering it. By all means, if you've got any questions, comments, otherwise, feel free to email us or drop us a line. Always happy to help. If you want any notes on anything we've covered tonight, feel free to email us as well. It's been a pleasure conducting the seminar, and I look forward to meeting you in person at one of our seminars, or alternatively, feel free to tune in for future seminars. Thanks again, have a great evening or morning, wherever you are in the world, and till we meet, all the best. Thank you.